Hello, Wine and Dine listeners. This month, we are going to be featuring a winery called Hansen Vineyards. This is a family-run winery. And the really cool thing that we found out when we were visiting this winery is that the winemaker originally went to college in Ithaca, is from Oregon, but went to college in Ithaca, spent some time in Washington, D.C. He was super cool to talk to because he was more in the lawmaking side. So we had a little conversation about that, and then moved back to Oregon and his family farm with very, very deep roots in the area to, which I loved because they actually have that family farm and very deep roots. Of course, I loved that it was deep roots with Rooted Planting Group, but we had a chance to actually talk with them, with the winemaker when we were there. So much fun. If you want to follow him on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, it's Hansen Vineyards. So you can follow them there. But one thing that I discovered when I was there was that his great-grandfather's winemaker's great-grandfather was originally from Norway and moved to Oregon in 1896, purchased the farm that was across the road from the winery. They then took the property into a winery in 1930. So that's when it says very deep roots. That's what they mean. Well, let me tell you, we love their wine. Of course, they had a good Pinot Noir. That's what Oregon is known for. But today, what I'm going to talk about is their Gamay. The Gamay Noir is one of the different grapes that exists, and we loved it. It was unique. It was dry. It was mouthful, flavorful, really savored the wine. So if you enjoy something different, go try the Gamay Red that they have. It's $26 per bottle. Good price point. Of course, if you're going to have it shipped, there's additional costs associated with it. But we really enjoyed their Gamay. They do have a club that you can join if you're interested. Not trying to sell this company, of course, but I do really think that if you're looking for something different, there's no cost to join, which I absolutely love. If you get out to Oregon, there's complimentary wine tasting for you and your guests. You get 15% off the first 12 bottles each year. And then if you go beyond that, you get 25% off. You also have access to new and limited wines. And they do have some invitations that you can get invited to. One is out in July. Maybe it changes different each year. And then they do invite you to vertical tastings. Now, of course, we won't be able to be there, but we did talk to Jason, the winemaker, and ask if there's any way we could virtually do that. So we're trying to figure out how to do that. If we learn more, we'll certainly let you all know. One thing that I loved that Jason said to us is whether you're a wine connoisseur or a novice, I should say, he's very open to questions. And he really, truly embodied that. So, he said no questions are a dumb question. And we can usually get pretty deep in the weeds if you want, which is what we loved about our conversation. So we'd love for you to hop out onto their website, explore them. We're going to post a link in the Facebook page. And if you do happen to buy anything from them and he wants to know how you found out about us, just drop our name, Amy and Brent Irvine, or Wine and Dime Podcast. Thanks, everyone. We hope you enjoy the rest of the show. Every week, it's my goal to share financial information that helps you in both your life and financial vineyard. We hope it takes you from your roots to the journey of your vines and the influences in the air that have helped craft your delicious life. Like wine, life and finances have different palates that should be celebrated and not judged. Welcome to this edition of Wine and Dime with Amy Irvine and Ann Arceo. Welcome, Ann, again.
Thank you, Amy. Happy to be here.
So Ann and I are meeting fairly early in the morning to record this podcast. So instead of talking wine, we were talking coffee. So I love coffee. Like coffee there's my two favorite. I was actually asked once if there was three things from a doctor, like three things that I wouldn't give up or would never want to give up, what would it be? And I said coffee, wine, and bacon.
I love that.
And I think they responded the same way you did, Ann. And they were like, okay. So I love coffee, especially with coconut milk in it. That's unsweetened coconut milk with just a little bit of vanilla, and it just does it for me in the morning. And when I was fasting not too long ago for some blood work and stuff that I had to have done, they told me I could drink black coffee, and I'm pretty convinced that I would give up coffee if I had to drink it that way. How about you?
I agree with you there. I definitely need a cup of coffee in the morning. Love some half and half in it. And not really particular with the coffee as long as it's strong and hot. But I definitely just enjoy the ritual of just having that cup of coffee in the morning too.
I don't want it wimpy. I want it flavorful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, my doctors have told me that the stronger the coffee, the less acidic it is, and it's actually better for you. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Just like more is better for you. Well, speaking of needing some strong coffee, we've got a strong topic to talk about today. Ann and I wanted to talk about saving for college when you have young children. Many of our clients, it's really across the board, but we do have a few clients, probably about a third, that are looking at this is a challenge or a competing goal that they have in their life, is saving for kids when they're younger, to know what what the right amount is and how to save it and how to split it up, especially when you have all those competing goals. So we thought we'd start with talking about, number one, what are some of the vehicles that actually could be used in saving for college? Because I feel like, similar to the retirement savings worlds, there's all these initials and there's all these different types of savings vehicle. And people really don't know the pros and cons of all of them. We're going to attach to the show notes kind of a summary of what we're going to be talking about. So make sure that you explore the attachment to the show notes and out on our website as we talk through some of this. But probably the most popular one is 529 plans. A lot of people hear about that. And do you want to talk just a little bit about sort of the minimum investments, sort of a little bit about how they work?
Yeah. So a 529 plan is a college savings account that has to be used for education expenses, or there's just some different tax implications if you use the money for something other than education expenses. So it's a great vehicle because it offers some tax breaks, and different states have different rules. If you put money in, you can invest it, and as it grows, there will be no taxes on that growth as long as you withdraw the money and use it for the qualified education expenses. And as I was saying, different states have different rules. I'm in Colorado, and you can contribute up to $10,000 a year and get a tax break for that $10,000 that you contribute. So that's a really great benefit. But other states, we work with a lot of clients in California, and they don't offer that, but you still get the benefit of having that tax-free growth on the money that you invest. And it's a really great account. It's easy to set up. A lot of the plans have age-based investments, which will offer you diversity and will automatically get more conservative as your child gets closer to college age. So there's not a lot that you have to do. And you can usually put in, you can start with a very small amount. And you could even do $50 a month and start there. And you can also, like our plan makes it really easy to send a link to grandparents or aunts and uncles for a birthday present and have them contribute to the account, which I think is a really neat way to support kids and maybe, something different than just another toy. So yeah, I think it's a really great account. It's the tricky part is we don't know the future. I have a 3 and a 6-year-old, and I don't know for sure that, that college is going to be in their future, though that's what we hope and work towards. But you can also change beneficiaries. So if, one went to a college and they got scholarships, or they, it was less expensive, we could also change the beneficiary and use funds for the other child. So that's an option as well.
And that was packed with a lot of, so one of the things too, because we also work with a lot of clients in Florida and New York. New York has the $10,000 tax deduction as well. Florida doesn't have state income taxes, so it doesn't really matter. So they don't have that, but they do have some really beneficial plans that are out there. And one of the things that you said about, so if you do have a state that's like that, one of the things that we'll often look at is to put that much in so you get that state tax deduction, and then start to look at other savings vehicles on top of that, just to make sure that you don't oversave in a 529 account because of the potential withdrawal restrictions that would be permitted on it, or prohibited. Not prohibited, I shouldn't use that word, because you can always get the money out, but I would say the taxability of it if you do take it out. And just as a reminder, some states actually allow you to use it for K through 12.
That's a good point. Yes.
And now you can use up to $10,000 towards student loans. So that is hugely beneficial. And they added in the sort of trade school coverage now as well, which is, I think, hugely beneficial. We need more people in the trade. So I'm thrilled to have that in there. And then finally, one of the things that I always remind people of is if you do get scholarships, you can withdraw up to that scholarship amount. You pay tax on the income if there's an income portion, but not the penalty. So if you do have a brainiac child, like Ann's children, then they get really good scholarships, you can withdraw from the 529 that amount and not have to pay the 10% penalty. You do have to pay tax on the growth, but not the 10% penalty. So again, there is ways to get money out of a 529 plan if there's scholarships. Because a lot of times people will say to me, well, what if my kid gets a ton of scholarships? That's okay. We pay tax on the money that the 529 grew to be that you pull out, but you would have paid tax on that if you'd put it in a brokerage account. So you're not any worse off on that one. So then kind of moving to what used to be a very well-known, very rarely used vehicle anymore, not the most preferential, because just as a reminder, folks, 529s are counted as parental assets. So when you're filing that fabulous FAFSA form, it's considered an asset of the parents, not of the child's. But the next vehicle, what we call an UGMA or an UTMA, which is a Uniform Gifts to Minors Act account. So many, many years ago, these accounts were used to shift assets from a parent to a child, with the child being in the lower tax bracket. Well, regulators caught up on that one. And now they're like, well, you can still do it, but if there's a certain amount that the UGMA accounts or UTMA accounts earn, then it gets taxed at the parent's tax bracket, not the child's tax bracket. Very rarely used anymore. I think some of the old accounts still exist. Ann, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the UTMA has pretty much replaced the UGMA. I think I've only seen one, and that was some years ago. And I think just in general, these accounts are a little bit trickier because once you transfer the money into that account, it's an investment account, but you're managing it for your child. And once you give that gift to your child and you put money in the account, that's irrevocable. You can't take that money back unless it's used for the benefit of the child. And it has to be above and beyond the normal care that you would provide, the food, the clothes, things like that. So, you could use it to pay for college expenses down the road. But the tricky part is that each state has different rules about when the child can take control of that account. And in some states at the age of 18, those assets become the child's, and they may not want to use that money for college. So, most of us thinking about an 18-year-old getting a big chunk of money, and in some states it's age 21, but even 18, age 21, that's not something a lot of us would feel very comfortable with. So there's just less control over those assets once you put them in that account, and rules for how you need to track it if you take any money out.
Yeah. And they are the child's asset on the FAFSA. So they are counted much heavier than like the 529 or any parental assets are. And then there's I don't even know, there's very few people that actually ever used this, but there is the Coverdell savings account. I don't even know. I mean, that was sort of like, they called it an education IRA for a while. The limits are very low, like $2,000 per beneficiary, which $2,000 per year saving for college doesn't get you very far. You can use K through 12 expenses on those. But again, very restrictive account, very rarely used anymore. Have you seen any in a while?
No. Yeah, I mean, just knowing how low the limit is, we've always gone in the direction of the 529 plan.
Yeah, it's pretty rare type of account. And there were phase outs for who could actually contribute to these accounts too. So I don't think that ever took off. Once 529 plans started to really make their, I guess you want to say, spotlight presence, I think more and more people went that direction, because if grandkids or if grandparents contribute to 529 plans, for example, the limits are so much higher. Like they can use it almost as a gift exclusion type thing. So I think the planning strategies just went right to those 529 plans. So those are kind of the top savings plans that a lot of people think about when they think about saving for college. But we like to think a step further than that as well. And one of the things that we kind of combine saving for college with those, because if you remember, I said a few minutes ago, 529 plans, we like you to get that state exclusion if you can, because that helps a lot of people on their taxes. But then going the next level and saying, well, if you have more money that you can actually save for your child's education, where would you put it? And that's where we start to get a little more strategic in the location and thinking about things like a Roth IRA or a brokerage account. And why don't you share a little bit about the benefits of saving in a Roth IRA for education?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that we were saying is that it doesn't have to there's no restrictions on what that money has to be used for. Mm-hmm. So with a Roth IRA, you're putting after-tax money in, and it grows tax-free. And when you take that money out in retirement, you're not paying taxes on it either. It's not specifically designed for education. You can put in the contributions that you make to it. So if you've contributed $10,000 to it, you can take that out before age 59 and a half, without any penalties on that. The limit on it is fairly low as far as what you can contribute each year. You can contribute $6,000 is the limit right now. And I think it's a good option for people to have a Roth IRA just to offer some tax diversity if you're saving in a 401k or a traditional IRA. Mm-hmm. I don't always know that we recommend that specifically for college, but I think it's another tool that could be used. And then, beyond that, there's a brokerage or a taxable account, which doesn't have any restrictions. There's no income restrictions. With the Roth IRA, once you hit certain income limits, there's you have to do something called a backdoor Roth IRA contribution, which I won't go into all the details of that, but it's just kind of this workaround once you hit those income limits to be able to contribute to a Roth IRA. With a brokerage or taxable account, you don't have any of those income restrictions. You can put in as much as you want. You can use the money however you want. The drawback there is that you pay taxes on growth and dividends and income as you go. But it's a great option, as Amy was saying earlier. If you max out, if you live in a state that offers a tax deduction for 529 contributions and you max that out, but you still want to save additional funds, opening that brokerage account gives you the flexibility to continue saving for your child, but also to use it in a different way. If they didn't go to college or they needed less than you thought, you could choose to gift that to them for a down payment for a house or a wedding, or, you could use that account in a different way.
And the Roth IRA is one of those things that when we talk about competing goals, one of the things that I always like about, adding, like putting the two together is to say, well, if your child does get good scholarships or something, and you've now just put a chunk of money away into a Roth IRA, and the same is true of a brokerage account. It's challenging to when people are having, or when they have young children, they're usually at the beginning part of their marriage too, and their career often might either be early or middle part of their career. So trying to come up with the cash flow is the challenge. Like ideally, sure, would love to be able to fully fund a 529 plan and a Roth and put some extra money in a brokerage. But what if you can't? What then? How do you sit down and decide? I mean, that's where the priority goal setting comes into play, I guess. But what are some ways that people can kind of think about those competing goals that I mentioned earlier, map that out?
Yeah, we often, and what you were saying with the priority, making the goals and putting them in a priority order, which is what we do when we sit down with clients, is saying, and we just met with a couple that have a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old last week, and we were asking them, where does college fall in the list of priorities? Is that number one? Would you be willing to work, additional years and push off retirement because you're going to make sure that your kids graduate without student loan debt? Is it, you're okay with your child paying some of their education? You want to contribute what you can. So I think sitting down with your spouse and having that honest conversation, is really important. And I do think that you can take out loans for college. You can't take out loans for retirement. So, even though, it's not our place as financial planners to tell clients what their priorities should be, I do think that making sure you take care of yourself and you're knocking down that high interest credit card debt and you're saving for retirement is really crucial. And that doesn't mean that you can't start even really small with a college savings account and asking grandparents, hey, instead of, another toy on a birthday, would you be willing to contribute a little bit to the 529 plan? And, building that up over time and increasing it over time. But I think really making sure that you are taking care of your finances is important. None of us, my husband and I, we don't want to someday become a burden to our children. That's, I think a big fear for a lot of parents. So we want to make sure that we're being responsible with our finances and trying our best to balance all of those goals.
I think it's hard because, you're a little bit more advanced, but some people are at the stages where they're having children, they're buying a house, they're changing jobs, they're changing locations. It's great for us to have this conversation about the different ways to save when you have young kids. But I do think the earlier you get started on mapping some of those numbers out, the more you're going to understand what those numbers look like. In fact, one of the things that I did was I kind of sat back and said, well, what if you had a 1 and a 10-year-old? Now, I split it between 1 and 10 because I wanted to show the variance and the dollar amounts that need to be saved if you start when a child is just basically under 1 versus if you wait until a child is 10 years old. So I created fictitious children and said, one is under 1-year-old and one is 10 years old. And the dollar amounts for saving to fully fund college. Now, I did an average when I look at like the cost of college as far as a goal. I sort of did an average state school. The idea being that, you fully fund their 4 years of education, basically. If they were under 1, it comes to about $12,000, almost $13,000 a year. If they grow, it's 0. If the assets grow, it's 0%. So that's if you had 0 growth, so you didn't invest it at all. Well, obviously you want to invest that money. But if they grow at 5%, now that requires a lower contribution per year and 5% I think is pretty realistic. Actually, it's probably a little low on the growth side. That is going to fully fund the education with a lower dollar amount. But I always like to show like high and low. So in that example, less than 1 year old, maximum contribution, if you just put it in a savings account, would be approximately $12,000, $13,000 a year. Now, again, if you're able to take a little more risk and get about a higher rate of return, that's going to lower that contribution. Now, waiting 10 years, so dollar for dollar. So example, if you wait 10 years, you have to put $15,000 in per year. So it's a big difference. If there's any way that you can contribute, even like you said, Ann, $50, then it really does make a difference. One of the things that my husband and I did, and I just think that you mentioned giving links to your family members when when you have a 529 account, when the kids are really young, they don't notice the difference between getting a toy and getting a contribution to their 529 account. They don't have a clue. So one of the best way for grandma and grandpa and aunt and uncles to actually make a huge impact on their respective grandchild or niece or nephew, in my opinion, is to do that. Because if you as a parent don't have to contribute as much because you've got family members that are also dedicated to education, that can be such a huge reprieve on the various goals that you have, the competing goals that you have, and taking that into consideration can make a huge difference. And when my nephews and nieces were young and still are, actually, that's sort of what we did. Birthdays, Christmas, any special, like anything special, we contributed to their 529. And I've got a couple nephews now that are starting to get up there towards graduation that are looking at that account and saying, I can use that money.
That's neat. Yeah.
And the good thing, it's under my name. And so it's not under the parent's name. It's actually not under the child's name either. So when they go off to college, this is not money that they have to claim, because technically I could change the beneficiary, and so they don't have to claim this. And depending on the college, starting this year in 2022, they don't have to claim it on the FAFSA as unearned income. Now the CSS profile, some colleges do, but that changed this year, so that's a big deal.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. So any other thoughts that you'd like to share when it comes to saving for kids' educations when you have small kids or when you have those competing goals?
I think we covered a lot of great topics, and probably it was a lot.
Yeah.
We're certainly here to help if you have questions and want to work with us on that. But I think just sitting down and talking about it with your partner and talking about those goals and opening an account and starting small. I certainly know what it's like to have competing goals and having such little ones that you don't know what the future is going to be and, what their college ambitions are going to be. But I think just, starting small and making sure that you're also balancing that with saving for retirement and paying off any debt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big one, right? And your own student loans, maybe even.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a whole nother topic that we're going to get into next month. So, well, we hope
that to come.
Yeah, right. We hope that you've enjoyed this show so much, and dig into the show notes with the summary that we've provided. We'll provide to you folks. As always, if you did like this, please feel free to share it with your friends, your family. We know this is an important topic. We'd love to hear from you on more questions that you might have. Make sure that you like us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, of course. And if you do have a particular question you'd like to know more about, please send us some notes and ask us those questions. We'd be happy to feature them in future podcasts. Thanks, everyone.
And that will about do it for today's episode of Wine and Dime. You can contact Amy through the website, www.rootedpg.com, or amy@rootedpg.com. You can also follow us on Facebook and Instagram @rootedpg for the latest news. And if you have any questions, comments, or topics you would like to hear about, feel free to let us know. And don't forget to rate and subscribe the show wherever you get your podcasts. And again, thank you for listening, and be sure to tune in next time.